Is a special Your Local Election Headquarters edition of 22 News Online.
Good evening and welcome to this digital election special of 22 News. I'm Don Shipman. The polls have just closed in Massachusetts and several other states too. There are several major races across the country and right here in Western Massachusetts. So we're going to be bringing you updates on all the races throughout the next hour or so here. Joining me tonight in an adjacent studio here at 22 News is political consultant Tony Signoli. Thanks for coming on the program.
Absolutely, Don. Hi.
Also joining us a little bit later on Zoom from Washington, D.C. will be political consultant Paul Robbins. They're going to be with us throughout the night here to analyze tonight's elections. But first, I want to get to this because we're going to begin with the races, really the one that everyone is watching, right? The presidential election between President Trump and Joe Biden. Several states have already been called. So we're talking about Indiana and Kentucky have been called for President Trump, while we also have Virginia and Vermont being called for Biden. President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden spending the final 48 hours on the road in potential swing states as two. More than 100 million voters casting their ballots before Election Day even started. A record turnout for early voting. And counting those votes could take some time, leading to, well, some speculation that it may be well after the polls close before we know the actual winner. President Trump is hinting that he may not be willing to wait.
We're going to go in the night of. As soon as that election's over, we're going in with our lawyers.
Our response is the president's not going to steal this election.
An election so divided, many cities are boarding up fears that there could be civil unrest after the results are determined. Now, the 100 million votes cast before Election Day this year equals roughly 71% of the total vote cast in all of 2016. When 136 million ballots were counted. So how do you think early voting and mail-in ballots will affect this year's election? That's the first question. And obviously we will start with Tony because you're here with us right now. What do you think? How is that going to impact everything?
Well, you know, one of the things that we've been doing is taking a look at where those votes have occurred to this point, taking a look at the demographics, the voter profiles of all those early voters. And we've got a pretty good idea of who they are. They fit the profile of Biden voters in an awful lot of spots. So that incredible turnout that we've seen, we think it benefits Joe Biden in states that have been talked about for a while now. It also gives Biden an opportunity in places like Arizona to be competitive, to perhaps have a chance to take these states, some of these early swing states. That's what we're seeing at this point. That's what we've been seeing for the last week or so. And of course, there's the other side of this. You never know for sure. But as we're looking at the demographics of who these folks are that are showing up to vote, and also looking at how many of them are brand new voters who haven't voted before, we think that gives an indication that Biden could have a good evening.
So do you think that if it's a close election, either candidate will challenge the results? And that would happen in the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, that would be the case. And not just there, but by state too. That's the other part of this, Don. You know, already we've seen the president and his team, you know, challenge things in Texas, in Pennsylvania already, and have lost a couple of cases. So it's not just at the Supreme Court level, but also at the district court level, at the Superior Court level, within some of these states. It depends on what it is that they're challenging. For an example, right now there are 14 to 27,000 absentee ballots being challenged already in South Carolina. Where the president would do that would be in the state's court, not the Supreme.
It's interesting because, I mean, there are literally thousands of attorneys waiting right now to go before a judge at some point in this process if we get there. Do you think that the recent confirmation of Justice Amy Coney Barrett could have an impact on any potential ruling here?
You know, it could. So much depends on how far this all goes. If tonight is definitive enough, Don, if someone gets to that magical number of 270 to 283 to 290, and there is a concession at some point from the other candidate, then that's done. We're not going to see a lot of court games go on. Certainly, though, you said it very well, there are thousands and thousands of attorneys on both sides who are ready, and also a lot of attorneys for different organizations and groups across America who are also thinking of weighing in if they have to. But the big thing this evening is to see that by about 11 or 11:30, if one of these candidates is close enough to the 270 or hits the 270, a lot of that court conversation will start to go away. A definitive victory by one or the other and no one really cares about playing this out for days longer in the courts.
There's a lot of emphasis on the state of Florida. I mean, I'm looking right now at one of the monitors here for NBC News, for example, and they're definitely focusing in on Florida. Explain to our viewers why Florida is so important.
It's huge right now because of the possibility that it could be in play, and it hasn't been in play in the longest time. Bear this piece in mind. From 1992 to 2016, Florida has only been won by a presidential winner by anywhere by 18,000 votes or less down. That's always how tough and contentious the state is. It's a state that you got to look at county by county. You look at the southern part of Florida, it's like one state. The northern, another state. The north votes much more like the rest of the south. The north, you've got so many folks that have come on down from New York, New Jersey, from the northeast, the snowbirds, etc. It's a real hodgepodge, and it's a microcosm of America when you look at it. What we're seeing right now is that what's interesting, and why there's so much interest in this, is that both campaigns have watched for the last couple of weeks as Joe Biden has not only held his numbers, but started to edge up, do a little bit better in certain areas. Watch Dade County tonight to see what happens. Watch Pinellas, certainly. But it is a state where, as Biden himself said, that should he win it, that's his path to victory. It's done. It's over. I don't think it's over with a Biden win in Florida. There's too many other jump ball pieces here still. But that's why Florida's so hot. And should Biden prevail in Florida, it might be an indication of what we're going to see for the rest of the evening.
President Trump down in the polls in several swing states. In a recent poll of Florida, Biden holds a slight 4-point lead over Trump. Biden gets support from 51% of likely voters in the state, while Trump gets 47%. Biden's lead is within the poll's margin of error, too, of plus minus 4 percentage points there. In September, the two presidential candidates were tied at 48%. Now, nationally, President Trump is down in the polls by 10 points. Do these national polls really matter, I suppose? And I asked that question because, back in 2016, everyone was looking at the polls and it didn't work out.
You're on target with that. We've all learned that you can't go by the polling. These polls now are a heck of a lot better than they were 4 years ago. Some of the key pollsters have made significant corrections in their practice, in their theory, and how they're getting the information that they are. But the big thing here, Don, is if you look at these polls, even if it's not as good as it looked for Joe Biden, these 9-point, 10-point national leads, if he's within that error margin, he's in a far better spot than Hillary Clinton was in 2016.
And then, too, there's just more polling taking place, right? Is that part of the equation here? Because, and also I asked that question too because some of the networks literally stopped polling back in 2016. They stopped polling the weekend before, and this time they kept going with their polling.
Absolutely. I so appreciate that question from you, because a lot of people don't realize that. There are so many more players in the game right now. There's electronic polls, names of which we normally don't hear. There are so many different political action committees that are out there polling. It's not just, the media and the campaigns themselves. So we're seeing composites of those polls. We're seeing a lot of agreement among some of the major names, the trade brand names in polling in America right now, and that's key. The other thing in this 4 years, not only is there more polling, you've got a heck of a lot more connection with voters, real voters that have been tracked, that we know will be voting, that we know voted, and who are consistent voters, and we've got their cell phone numbers. That's the big difference in just 4 years, Don. That's a huge number of a much larger percentage of folks that you can really actually reach by cell phone.
If you are just joining us here on wwlp.com, we are chatting with political consultant Tony Signoli. Also joining us live from Washington, D.C. via Zoom is political consultant Paul Robbins. He's been listening in as we move forward here. So I thank you for coming on the program as well. And we've been talking about polling. You're in D.C. right there in the thick of it all. What are the important states? What are the states that we need to be watching tonight, Paul?
Well, I mean, the trifecta, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. But the problem is that he's got to win all those three. And if he doesn't win one of them, like, he's in trouble. And, and has a path to victory. So Biden has an easier to. But
right, let me jump in real quick because I think we're having some issue with your audio, and I'm gonna take that question to Tony instead right now while we get that cleared up. So yeah, what are some of the states that we really need to be paying attention to? We talked about Florida.
Right. Well, most definitely. And I heard some of what Paul had to say, and he's on target. Definitely seeing what shakes with Minnesota, with Michigan, with Pennsylvania, even more important, and Wisconsin. Those three, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. If Biden can win 2 of those 3, if he wins all 3 of those, that's a grand difference than what happened in 2016. And it looks like the kind of work the Biden campaign has put into those states, not just in the last month or months, but for literally since he became the nominee, looks like it could definitely be able to bring them what they need, the Biden campaign there. Other key states right now, Arizona is in play for Joe Biden in a big way. Something that's unique here, too, is that you've got U.S. Senate candidates who are very good, very significant candidates. Democrats have launched campaigns that are well-moneyed. These are some candidates that were just amazing. No one expected to see this kind of a bumper crop of U.S. Senate candidates on the Democratic side. And in 9 of those states, they could be helping Joe Biden. It could be a reverse coattail kind of a thing. Normally it's the presidential ticket that helps down the line, down the ladder to Senate and House. In this instance, some of those strong Senate campaigns could most definitely be helping the overall ticket and helping Biden-Harris.
Let's talk about Pennsylvania, too, because one of the reasons why there's been so much attention on Pennsylvania is because of mail-in voting. There's been some litigation prior to the elections as well. And we also know that, if I understand correctly, in Pennsylvania, they weren't allowed to start counting any of those absentee or those early votes until this morning. Right. So, I mean, that's going to take some time. So that means that we will know the results from people voting in person today earlier than we will probably with those early votings.
Exactly. The exact opposite of somewhere like Arizona, where all the early votes that were in, they began counting those this morning by law. They were allowed to begin. At 8 o'clock, the Secretary of State of Arizona had a pretty good idea of what all that early voting looked like. She had an idea as to who it was that prevailed there. Now she'll do the, today's ballot. Pennsylvania, the exact opposite. And that's why you've heard, Don, Pennsylvania can take 2 or 3 days to get everything in that they need. On the other hand, if there are some really significant numbers here, some really a situation where Biden was able to pick up so much of the early vote and today's vote in certain key counties in Pennsylvania, that could be the flip. We're at a stage of this game right now, over the last couple of presidential campaigns, where it's not states that we look at, it's counties within the states. It's even precincts within the states. And in Pennsylvania, it is like chess on 20 boards at one time. It's a key prize for Biden, key.
I want to shift gears just real quickly here, because we just got an alert from our Nexstar network, News Nation, saying that Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has won a 7th term in Kentucky. This was there was some speculation that it may not happen for him. The Democrat Amy McGrath in that election, there was a lot of money put in on her campaign on her behalf.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Kentucky. We've campaigned there for candidates in the past. McConnell's hold on Kentucky is just so strong, and there were so many different groups and organizations mobilized to help him. This was a tall order for Amy McGrath to pull off. As much money as poured into it, as much as this was a hopeful wish for Democrats to try to take McConnell out, I think seeing McConnell go as leader only comes if the Democrats are able to take a majority in the Senate overall. Tough place to play, Kentucky. And in Kentucky, there's another key piece here. The folks in Kentucky, especially independent and unenrolled voters, they kind of get the drift of where the bread is buttered. They'll hold their nose on things that McConnell has done because they know the amount of money that he brings home to that state. It's incomprehensible. It always bothers me as someone from Massachusetts because I'm paying for a lot of things as a taxpayer in Kentucky. We all are. It's amazing the amount of pork he brings home.
And it's interesting, too, though, because I know that there was some concern because prior to a Trump presidency, he wasn't for Trump, but that quickly shifted over the course of the past 3.5, 4 years here.
Absolutely, Don. Good point that you make. I think what McConnell saw as Republican Senate leader was an opportunity to really be the main player on Capitol Hill, that with this president, he was going to be able to get things that in his wildest imagination he never would have been able to get with President Reagan, President Bush, or President Bush again. This is a bonanza for McConnell in so many different ways. bear in mind, too, his wife is a member of the cabinet. It's stunning. The relationships that McConnell has are incredible on Capitol Hill, but when Donald Trump became president of the United States, even more doors open. Trump, arguably, and I think we'll see this in a lot of books down the road, and even some historians talk about it now, he really allowed McConnell to pretty much do anything he wanted to do. And it just gave incredible power, even more than the norm, to a Senate leader.
Does this kind of give an indication of what the Republican Party is now compared to what it was 4 years ago?
What a great question. And that depends on what happens tonight, Don. It depends on if the Democrats are able to take the Senate. It depends on Donald Trump losing. Should Trump lose, should there be a repudiation of Republicans in the United States Senate as well, that's going to make a difference. This party will have to take a look at itself and say, what do we do from here? Trump was an anomaly above and beyond what the party has been for decades and decades.
Our digital special here on 22 News on wwlp.com will continue. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back here now, 22 News Digital Election Special. We're going to continue our discussion now with of the presidential race in just a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the local races. Joining me now here in an adjacent studio at 22 News, we have political consultant Tony Signoli. Okay, so we have the race for U.S. Senate in Massachusetts. Incumbent Senator Ed Markey being challenged by Republican Kevin O'Connor. Markey was first elected to the U.S. Senate from Massachusetts in 2013, a special election, and then was elected to a full term of his own in 2014. And prior to serving in the Senate, Markey had served in the House of Representatives since 1976. Kevin O'Connor, 58 years old, and is an attorney from the Boston suburb of Dover. What are your predictions here? And I'm already noticing, I just want to make sure because I'm seeing some alerts that are popping up on my phone here. I saw one alert pop up saying that there is a possible projection here for Markey as a victory here in this one. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it would be very difficult for O'Connor to beat Ed Markey in Massachusetts, not just because of the fact that there are so few registered Republicans, less than 30% of the overall electorate that actually shows up to vote, but because so many independents are on the rolls, dig Ed Markey, will vote Democratic, especially in a Democratic year. O'Connor's got the difficulty of being in this race in a year that is a presidential. We've got so many people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who are Democrats who certainly have come out to vote for Biden. The other thing about this race, though, Don, is that Markey's big fight, his big win, that was in September. He took out a Kennedy in Massachusetts, thought to be impossible. Remember when when it was first announced that Joe Kennedy was going to run, there were a lot of people urging Ed Markey not to run for re-election. They didn't want him to get embarrassed. It's astonishing what he did. He is the Massachusetts political comeback story probably of the last 50 or 60 years. It's amazing what he pulled off to win that primary. So I think at the end of the evening, Ed Markey is still our United States Senator.
Yeah, not to belabor, the primary there, but was that Markey's win or was that Kennedy's loss?
Interesting. A lot of folks are really analyzing this now.
Yeah.
Kennedy did not perform quite as well as folks predicted or thought that he would. But Markey, it was scientific, it was strategic. To go from being arguably 24 to 28 points down at the beginning of the race to winning by the margin that he did, that's not an accident. That was really great political strategy by Markey and his team, especially by his chief, John Walsh, his campaign manager, the same person who had run Deval Patrick's effort to become governor of Massachusetts.
And you're looking at those numbers right there on your screen. These are the results as they're coming in. It's only 1% of the precincts reporting right there, but you can see Markey is well ahead. All right, so there are a total of 35 Senate seats up for grabs this election. Republicans currently control 53. So Democrats need to win a net gain of 3 to gain control. At least a dozen Republican Senate seats are now at risk, including 2 in blue states, Maine and Colorado, and 10 in states that Trump won in 2016. Democrats are only defending 2 seats in competitive contests, and that's Alabama and Michigan. Who do you think will walk away with control of the Senate after this election?
Well, it's hard to prognosticate this one. You just never know because it's such a finite game within the states, the local politics that goes on. As I had mentioned earlier, too, it's not just winning the majority of the state or key Democratic or Republican areas for the respective candidates to win. It's astonishing the level of play you've got to get into wards, precincts, and counties within some of these states. It is amazing to a lot of us, Don. If you had asked me 6 months ago or a year ago, did the Democrats have an opportunity to take over control of the United States Senate? I would have said, gosh, no, not in these states. But what we've seen is well-moneyed, well-financed, very good candidates in these races. The other piece, too, it's 3 to take over. It's 3 to have the majority. But if Donald Trump wins the presidency, they need 4. Because the Vice President of the United States, as you know, is a tiebreaker. He's the 51st senator when it comes down to breaking a tie if necessary. So it's 1 more that they need should Trump prevail this evening.
We already mentioned Mitch McConnell and his reelection. That looks like that's good to go for him. Meantime, what are some of the issues that you think Democrats will be focusing on if they win the Senate?
Right away, first thing is trying to find a way to deal with this pandemic. That's number 1. So much so, too, because Biden, so many candidates in the House, in the Senate, and because the leadership in the House has basically said, this is job 1. We must deal with this. It's not just the health of America. It's just not keeping people safe. It's also impacting the economy. They're hand in hand. So I think you're seeing health and economy together in that. And also you'll see the Democrats try to figure out what do they do, even if they should win back Pennsylvania Avenue, take over again, have leadership in the United States Senate. What do they do to protect the ACA, Obamacare? What happens? As you know, and as I've heard you report on in the past, we know that within a few days, that issue is going to be before the United States Supreme Court. What political move, what legal aspect, what creation of legislation occurs? What brilliant move did the Democrats come up with to try to keep what they've already achieved and won under Barack Obama?
And if they do win the Senate, do you think that is there a chance that they'll try to get rid of the filibuster?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation about that. It goes back and forth. Privately, you'll find that some Democrats actually like the idea if they're in control of it. It all depends on who's in power, Don. That's the great test here. Will the Democrats be more magnanimous, perhaps, than the Republicans on the filibuster? The gut is probably yes, because they've got to appease a lot of sections of the party to be able to take a look at, as quickly as it comes, the 2022 midterm elections. We're already starting to think about that.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation. A quick break after this.
Live from the 22 News Broadcast Center, this is an update from your local election headquarters.
Good evening, I'm Ciara Speller. The time is 8:26 right now, and polls have closed here in Massachusetts just about half an hour ago. And numbers have been coming in from across the state. And according to the Associated Press, Joe Biden has won Massachusetts. Massachusetts is considered to be a safe blue state. The state has not been carried by the Republican nominee since Ronald Reagan in 1984. Vermont and Virginia have also been called for Biden, among other states, while Indiana and Kentucky have been called for President Trump, again among other states. According to the AP, Biden now has 85 electoral votes, while Trump has 55. Now we're also closely tracking the ballot questions here in Massachusetts. Ballot question 1 is a question of whether to update the 2012 right to repair law in Massachusetts, which allows independent repair shops to access vehicle diagnostic and repair information. A yes vote on question 1 would expand the current right to repair law, giving car owners and independent repair shops access to mechanical data related to a vehicle. A no vote on the right to repair would keep the law the same. It looks like yes is winning by a large margin here. And ballot question 2 would establish a ranked choice voting system in Massachusetts, which would allow voters to rank their candidates in order of their preference. Supporters of question 2 say the voting system would ensure that whoever has a majority of the vote, but opponents say the system is both expensive and confusing. As you can see, yes is winning right now. Now to Ed Markey, being projected winner in the race for U.S. Senate in Massachusetts. He's being challenged by Republican Kevin O'Connor. Markey was first elected to the U.S. Senate from Massachusetts in 2013, a special election, and then was elected to a full term of his own in 2014. And in the race for the 2nd Congressional District of the U.S. House, Worcester Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern being challenged for re-election by Republican Tracy Lavorne. This would be McGovern's 13th term in office. And the 2nd Congressional District includes eastern portions of Franklin and Hampshire counties, as well as a single precinct in Hampden County. And our 22 News digital election special is happening right now on our website, wwlp.com, and on the 22 News mobile app.
We're back here tonight on our 22 News Digital Election Special, continuing our coverage all of the election results, both nationally and right here in Western Massachusetts. Joining me tonight in an adjacent studio here at 22 News is political consultant Tony Signoli. I want to thank you once again for coming on the program. We got another 30 minutes to go here, and we got a lot to tackle. So another race here in Massachusetts is the 2nd Congressional District of the U.S. House. Worcester Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern is being challenged for re-election by Republican Tracy Lavorne. Now, this would be McGovern's 13th term in office. He's the chairman of the House Rules Committee. Lavorne is a business owner from Grafton who ran unsuccessfully against McGovern 2 years ago. The 2nd Congressional District is mostly in central Massachusetts, but it does include eastern portions of Franklin and Hampshire counties, as well as a single precinct in Hampden County, located in the Bondsville section of Palmer. So what are your predictions with this one right here?
You know, again, this is one where it benefits Congressman McGovern. The fact that this is a Democratic state, has a preponderance of a large Democratic base of vote, and that a lot of independents and unenrolled voters in his district dig him. He's been around for 13 terms now. It's a case of where he's got significant seniority right now, you know, in the United States House of Representatives. He's able to bring a lot back to his district. He's extremely active. This is someone that you see once a week, just like Congressman Neal. They're back in their districts. They're not just doing what they do in Washington. He has one of the most active constituencies that there is. You know, if there were any opportunity for his opponent, it would be in some parts of Worcester County that have, you know, gone a little bit more conservative Republican. But I think what you're going to see here, Don, is a mirroring of the presidential vote in Massachusetts. You're going to see him gain a significant 70% plus of his electorate to send him back to the United States House yet again.
And we had just reported, too, that the Associated Press is reporting that Joe Biden has won Massachusetts, as a projected winner for Massachusetts. You mentioned Worcester County being a little bit more conservative or Republican. Kind of give us an idea of the demographics in that sense of
Sure.
You know, how that kind of where the red line is and the blue line, you know,
Yeah.
where it all kind of turns purple. It seems. You know.
Sure. Well, it's kind of weird when you take a look at how the Massachusetts congressional districts are cut up. You take a look at Congressman Neal's district; it's gigantic, you know, in geography. The size of the thing is quite something, and that's because of the number of people that are necessary to be within that congressional district. You look at McGovern's, and it's all over the place. It zigzags here and there, and it picks up a chunk of Worcester County. Worcester County, for an example, voted for Scott Brown over Elizabeth Warren in the United States Senate race. That's a surprise to some people when you take a look at the consistency of Massachusetts voting for Democrats, it being considered to be a Democratic state. So you get a little bit more to the conservative side in Worcester County. Donald Trump, that's where his numbers will come from. That 27, 28, 29% of the vote that Trump will get in Massachusetts, a big chunk of it is going to come from Worcester County, Don.
And don't you think, too, you mentioned Elizabeth Warren, for example, don't you think that location matters, too, her being from the Boston area and not from, say, Worcester, for example?
Absolutely. Politics is local. Who
Yeah.
coined that? Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts, and he was right. And that's the case here. And when it comes down to the local player, that local person, McGovern is viewed as a person from the district who's there all the time. Folks know him and they like him.
All right, I want to move on to all 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. We talked about the Senate, Let's talk about the House. On the line here for the 2020 election, the Democrats currently hold a 232 to 197 majority over Republicans. Do you think that Democrats will keep control of the House?
They definitely will keep control of the House, and they'll actually pick up some more numbers. That's going to be important for a whole bunch of reasons. But picking up more numbers makes some of our local players even more powerful. Congressman Neal is one of the most powerful people right now in Washington, not just in the House of Representatives, but in Washington across the board as the chairman of Ways and Means. You're going to see the Democrats pick up some more seats. That's going to help them a lot as you see these congressional races come up again in 2 years. That's the other piece to always remember, Don, is that members of the House, they're up every 2 years. A strong base, picking up more right now is going to help them to survive and do well in the 2022 midterm elections.
And so you think that they will pick up more this time
I do.
around? Very
positive of that, as a matter of fact, and hearing that from some of the members themselves, from some of the leadership, and from some of the folks that are responsible for turning out that vote. Again, a situation where some really great candidates have shown up to run for those seats, and they've been well money. That is one thing. Whether you like Nancy Pelosi or not, she is a cash register for the Democrats. She's been able to go out and raise money unlike many of her predecessors. It's stunning what she's been able to do to provide for these new House Democrats.
It's interesting, too, to watch, to see, depending on where that Democrat is located, if Nancy Pelosi is, front and center in those campaign ads, too.
She's smart. She's a smart politician. Yeah. She knows where she's either going to help or hurt somebody. You won't see her come near a member of the Democratic House, in the campaign. You won't see an ad or anything if she thinks she's going to hurt them. But she will find a way to raise money for them and to get others to be helpful to them.
I want to delve a little bit more into, so you're saying they're going to get more seats. What does that mean moving forward for the Democrats in the House then? What can they get done having more representation?
Well, one of the things there is if you've got more Democratic members of the House in a United States Senator's district, even if that United States Senator is a Republican, that's a lot of pressure. That's local lobbying to the nth degree. It's the kind of thing that's happened to Susan Collins in Maine, to have picked up one or two key Democrats, for those Democratic House members to have been retained 2 years out. That made a difference in that base, those ground troops that are out there that are opposing her right now.
That's so interesting that you say that, because, and I've heard you say this before too, is that politics is local. Yeah. And when I asked that question, I was thinking, of all the politics happening in Washington, but you're telling me that it's really on the local level, and that creates pressure?
Very much so. Members of the House can get together within a Senate seat, within a senator's seat, within their particular state, and be able to exert pressure or to lobby that U.S. senator to vote a certain way, to do certain things, to be responsive on aid packages, to be responsive on stimulus packages. That can absolutely happen, and we've seen it happen a lot of times over the course of the years. It was something that Tip O'Neill did very well. He would organize members of the House to be able to move and motivate U.S. senators, even Democrats who might not have been, thinking the same way as O'Neill or Moakley or Early, that group of leaders of that time.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation here on wwlp.com, the 22 News Digital Election Special. Stick around. We're back here now, 22 News Digital Election Special. We're continuing our coverage here of all the election results nationally and here locally in Western Massachusetts. Joining me now in an adjacent studio here at 22 News is political consultant Tony Signoli. Thank you so much for coming on the program once again and being with us. Lots of great insight. I want to talk about these ballot questions, a couple of them here, and it's been super confusing, I think, for so many people. The first one, that ballot question, question 1, is a question of whether to update the 2012 right to repair law in Massachusetts, which allows independent repair shops to access vehicle diagnostic and repair information. The proposed update would specifically include wireless technology known as telematic information. Supporters of this question say that it will provide equal access to independent repair shops, but opponents say that it could put the security of drivers' data at risk. If approved, the ballot question would require car makers to outfit every car, beginning with 2022 models, with an open access platform for mechanical data available to car owners and local repair shops. So, it is super confusing, and I think one of the reasons it is confusing is because there are so many ads on television going back and forth, and some scare tactics involved here as well. But you're looking right here on your screen right now, yes with 74% of the vote, no with 26%. Do you think question 1 will get approved?
This is a tough one. It is confusing because there was so much money spent.
Yeah.
Don, we don't know the final number as to how much is spent until we see the final OCPF filings, those final last, documents that show the kind of money that was spent on advertising. But right now, you're at about $43 to $45 million that was spent on this one question. people are smart. Voters in Massachusetts, if this prevails, if this gets a yes vote, they're going to be looking at the no side, which was so heavily sponsored, so heavily backed by the large auto companies, and they're going to be circumspect of that they are circumspect of it throughout the campaign. This is almost a David and Goliath. What we were seeing in polling is that despite all the ads on both sides that were very, very good and confusing, they were compelling and confusing at the same time, a lot of people just identified with their local mechanic, that local shop down the street with the little guy. Very much a David and Goliath kind of thing. It was effective that the independent repair folks were able to get the word out. Hey, take a look at who's paying for the other side of this thing. This is Ford, Toyota, General Motors, etc.
It's interesting too, because I saw one of the other arguments on the other side of that was that this is happening with our smartphones, for example. Yeah. You have to have special access to to repair an Apple device or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Let's move forward with the next one here, I believe. The second question on the ballot would establish a ranked choice voting system in Massachusetts. This is already happening in Maine. If passed, ballot question 2 would change the way the elections are decided here in the Commonwealth. It would create a ranked choice voting system, which would allow voters to rank candidates in order of preference. And this would only be needed in races where there are 3 or more candidates for a single office. And it also wouldn't apply to the presidential elections. Governor Baker and the Lieutenant Governor have come out in opposition of ranked choice voting because they believe that it could delay results and increase the cost of the elections.
We think it's very complicated, and we're about to have a very complicated election administratively just without it. I'm going to vote no on that, and so is the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, so Maine is the only other state in the country with ranked choice voting. I saw lots of stuff on Facebook, people from Maine, for example, doing little explainers on the ranked choice voting, and they seem to be all for it there. What are your predictions with this one?
This is a tough one. This is going to be tight because you've mentioned the folks that were against, and very popular, Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, indeed. But on the other side of this, you've had the State Attorney General, Maura Healey. You've got Elizabeth Warren. John Kerry, that really surprised me, to see John Kerry come out on this and say, you know what, we need this. There's a case that's been made that for those who aren't well-moneyed, who don't have big names, who are trying to break into politics to serve, that this is a good thing. That's the predominant argument for ranked choice. Having done some campaigns in Maine, having benefited from it in Maine, I can see that that is the case, what benefited us there. But on the flip side, this can be confusing to a lot of people, Don. If there's 4 or 5 folks on the ballot and you're being asked to go in and rank them from 1 to 5, one of the key things that's going to have to be part of the education on this is that you don't have to do that. If this prevails, you can go in and still vote for that one person that you really, really, really like, and it's kind of like voting for him then 5 times. This is a situation where the ballot keeps being reconfigured, re-looked at until somebody gets 51% of the vote. It's no longer a situation where 5 people running and the top vote getter wins because they got 38%. That's what this is designed to do, to really create a situation where the person that's being elected is really the person supposedly that the vast majority really want to see in that seat.
So would it slow down the process of calculating everything out in the end? And then also, to add to that, would it slow down the actual voting process, people going into the booth?
It could. I mean, anything that further confuses the voters, that's more of an impediment, that's the last thing you want to see. So if this does prevail, hopefully the people that have put it forth, who have supported it and endorsed it, are going to stay the course and keep educating the electorate in Massachusetts as to how this works. This is on the ballot this evening in Alaska as well. And when you think about it, this is normally the type of thing you'd see California, maybe New Jersey, pick up first and try to run with. So the fact that we're doing it, we might be a bit of a guinea pig for the rest of the country on this particular one.
Opponents say that ranked choice voting could decrease voter turnout. Do you think that that's a possibility?
It is. I mean, if more confusion is out there about this. You know, I can even see the opportunity for shenanigans to be played here for folks in my profession to be able to use this, confuse an electorate, to suppress voters, just making them think that it's really difficult, like, gosh, golly gee whiz, there's 7 people running and it doesn't matter, your vote's just not going to count the way it did before. All of that could happen. So really, it's going to come down to those folks who are proponents, and there's some really good people in favor of this, making the case as strongly as they can as to how this actually works. You don't want this to be a hindrance to people in a multi-candidate race down the road.
And yeah, just looking at the numbers right there, 51% for yes, 49 for no. So at this point, it's still pretty close. And I kind of want to end on this note because you touched on this. This type of voting could possibly help candidates who don't have a lot of money in the race.
Absolutely so. You know, if you're the main player in a 7-way race or a 5-way race, if you're the one who's been able to go out and earn and win 31%, maybe you're the best person for that seat. Maybe you're the best candidate. Maybe you're the most well-known. Maybe you're the incumbent. That's the other thing. The idea here is to help equal the playing field. It's so hard to break into a House seat, a Senate seat. It's so difficult when someone's been in that seat and has name recognition, brand name, etc. This is designed to help that player who doesn't have that to be able to compete. It's an equalizing effect.
Is there a party divide here too, or no?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that piece, because there most definitely is. The Mass GOP is against this, very strongly so. Mass Fiscal Alliance and other more Republican-oriented activist groups, whereas on the other side, it's predominantly Democratic.
All right, and our governor falling in line then, I guess, right there, party lines.
On this one, yeah.
Okay, let's continue our conversation after the break. Good evening and welcome to our 22 News Digital Election Special. We're continuing our conversation, our discussion on the presidential race now, and joining me in an adjacent studio here at 22 News, political consultant Tony Signoli. All right, so we want to talk about President Trump speaking today while thanking his campaign staff. Take a look. President Trump was greeted with cheers and applause at his campaign headquarters in Northern Virginia today. He was asked by a reporter if he's written both an acceptance and a concession speech.
No, I'm not thinking about concession speech or acceptance speech yet. Hopefully we'll be only doing one of those two. And you know, winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not.
All right, he kind of answered that. After hearing him say that, do you think that it's possible that the president will not accept the results? of the election?
It depends on how big of a vote this is against him, if it's against him. I mean, that's what so many of us have been talking about. One way or the other, you're hoping that this is a very definitive victory for one candidate or the other, so that we don't get into all kinds of court challenges, and so we don't have a situation where you've got a sitting president saying, hey, you know, something went wrong here. This isn't right. I'm going to fight this. I'm not leaving. That would be extraordinary and unusual. I do think, though, that there are enough people around the president who won't want to see him go out that way. I don't think it's a question of whether he can accept the results or not, again, if they're definitive enough. If Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and other states that he was able to squeak out electoral college victories with 4 years ago go against him, it's really hard for him to make the case to hang around and fight.
And we do have the latest results so far. Let's see what we have here. 85 for Biden right now, 61 for Trump. There's still a lot to go here. It's early on in the night.
It is, very early yet.
Okay, with several states accepting mail-in ballots after Election Day, is it possible that we won't know who actually wins the election here for days?
That could happen, Don, but again, I think you're going to see something that's definitive enough this evening, you know, with a bunch of these states, like Arizona, the others that I've mentioned, possibly even Nevada, going into a jump ball situation and going to Biden. That can make a difference. There's a thought from a lot of folks who are a lot smarter than I am, who've been watching this, who are thinking 11:30 this evening, we may have a pretty good idea. In fact, Paul Robbins, who was going to be with us this evening but who had some difficulties joining us from Washington, he made a great case for that a few days back, perhaps even before others started talking about it. He also was saying, watch Georgia, that this state could in fact be in play. 3 months ago, none of us thought that that would be the case. And what we're finding is that Paul was on target, very much so. We're seeing a state that's in play tonight for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I was going to say, Georgia hasn't been blue since the mid-90s or something like that, right?
Exactly. But you got a lot of anger down there. There's a lot of folks angry with the Republican governor, with some of the shenanigans and things that have gone on with COVID, and also relative to suppressing vote. You've got Stacey Abrams, who almost won the governorship, who's been out there on the streets as if she was running for governor all over again, trying to bring out that vote for Biden-Harris.
Yeah, and there's also been a huge demographic change, too, in the state of Georgia,
yes,
with a huge influx of new
Thank
voters.
You, yeah.
If the election is close, could we possibly see a repeat of Bush versus Gore? Remember 2000?
I remember it way too well, and I lived it for weeks and months thereafter and whatnot. You know, could that happen? You know, 1876 and 2000, those are the two nightmare years in presidential races where the unthinkable happened. And in 2000, that was unique. I don't think that's what we're going to see this time around. I don't think so, especially due to the fact that it seems right now that Florida is a little bit more competitive. And regardless of how Florida itself goes, that's indicative of what's happening in a few other southern states right now, where Biden is actually contending and playing where Hillary Clinton did not.
Real briefly here, we found out earlier today that Governor Baker didn't vote for the presidential election, if I understand correctly. He didn't fill in either one. We had heard early on, I want to say maybe like a week or two ago, that that there was a possibility that he was going to vote for Biden. We know that he's not a Trump supporter. Do you find it interesting, though, that he didn't vote at all?
I do, very much so. And I'm not surprised that he did not vote for Joe Biden. I think that Charlie Baker is thinking about down the road. I don't think it's so much thinking about a third term in Massachusetts, but if Donald Trump loses this evening, the Republican Party's got to rebuild itself. And they're going to look to people like Charlie Baker, consensus builders, folks that are more middle of the road, that aren't as hard right. Baker's the kind of guy that could play in other places as either a player on the ticket or perhaps even as the nominee. So I think that could be happening right now, too. Charlie Baker's playing this as smart as he possibly can.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Tony Signoli. And our election coverage continues at 10 o'clock.
Live from the 22 News Broadcast Center, this is an update from your local election headquarters.
Good evening, I'm Ciara Speller. The time is 8:56 right now, and 22 News is working for you with the latest numbers from across the state as they continue to roll in. Looking at some of the local races now, Democrat Rosemary Sacamani is currently beating independent Lori Landers Carvalho for Hampden County Register of Probate. Independent Suzanne Sagan, the incumbent Register of Probate, did not run for re-election this year. And in the race for the 2nd Hampden and Hampshire Senate District, incumbent Democrat John Vilas is currently beating his challenger, Republican John Kane. This is a rematch between the candidates in the special election in May, when Vilas was elected to fill the seat vacated when Don Humison was elected mayor of Westfield. Also in Massachusetts, the Senate is the Worcester, Hampden, Hampshire, and Middlesex District Democrat Senator Ann Goby of Spencer is beating challenger Republican Steve Hall. And in the race for the 3rd Hampden District of Massachusetts, House Republican Nick Boldiga is currently pulling ahead of challenger Kerry O'Connor. Boldiga was first elected in 2010. He's currently one of the only 2 Republican legislators representing Western Massachusetts-based districts. O'Connor is a member of the Agawam School Committee. And now to the 4th Hampden District of the Massachusetts House, where several candidates are trying to fill a vacant seat. Westfield Republican Kelly Pease currently in the lead right now, as you can see. This seat was vacated by John Vilas when he won the special election for a state Senate seat. And the 7th Hampden District seat is also up for grabs. On the ballot are Democrat Jake Oliveria and Republican James Chip Harrington. Harrington is winning right now, and the winner will replace longtime Ludlow State Rep Thomas Patriolotti, who decided not to run for re-election. Now to another open seat is the 9th Hampden District. Democrat Springfield City Councilor Orlando Ramos is running against independent Robert Underwood. Ramos has a comfortable lead right now, and the winner will replace Jose Tosado, who also decided not to run for re-election. 22 News is your local election headquarters, so be sure to stay with us on all screens throughout the night as results continue to roll in.